Welcome to Creating Student Success Outcomes. What are outcomes? Outcomes are the what of education. What are students going to learn, and what do they need to show in order to determine if they have met the outcome? Traditionally, outcomes are content-based. For example, in math, students need to show that they can factor numbers into prime factors. This skill is very specific to math and is not applicable outside of the math classroom. Therefore, the outcomes of factoring numbers into prime factors is a content outcome. Outcomes determine the information that is taught and the assessments that are given. In the case of factoring numbers into prime factors, information should focus only on prime factoring. It should not expand to include factoring of equations, for example. Assessing the outcome would have students specifically show the skill of factoring into prime factors. In addition, a measurable component, for example, factor into prime factors with an 85% accuracy, would be used to determine when a student completed the outcome. Students should be able to clearly see how activities and assessments align with course outcomes. As referred to previously, if the outcome is that students will be able to factor numbers into prime factors with at least 85% accuracy, they should not be given material on how to factor equations or be tested on questions that are not specific to factoring numbers into prime factors. Student success outcomes are skill-based outcomes, not content-based. They are skills that will benefit students in future classes, regardless of content. For example, being able to create a study guide would be considered a student success outcome because students could create study guides in any classes they take. You can use course content to teach these skills. The benefit of this is that teaching student success outcomes does not have to take a significant amount of time. In addition, these skills will help to strengthen students as learners and will accelerate their ability to learn. By investing in student success outcomes at the beginning of the quarter, student learning can measurably improve. The first step in creating student success outcomes is to identify what skills your students need to be able to do to learn the content and succeed in your course. Remember, these are not content specific and should be able to be applied in all of the classes your students may take. The examples of such skills are: my students need to be able to read a textbook and get information from it. My students need to be able to create and use a study guide. My students need to be able to identify and use student support services on campus. At this point, please pause the video and take some time to identify 3 to 5 non-content skills your students need to be able to do. Now that you have created 3 to 5 student success activities, we'll proceed on to the next slide. Scaffolding is a very important thing to think about as you are creating student success outcomes. A good analogy for understanding scaffolding is to think of a child learning to walk and run. Most children follow these steps or something similar. Step 1, they pull up onto furniture, hold on, and walk around it. Step 2, they hold on to the fingers of an adult. Step 3, they hold on to one finger of an adult. Step 4, they let go of the adult's finger and take 1 or 2 tentative steps before falling. Step 5, they begin taking multiple steps with arms raised for balance. Step 6, they lower the arms and walk. Step 7, they run and fall often. And after that, they're often running. Imagine if there is a child who is holding on to your hand. Would you pull your hands away? Most likely not, as you would not want the child to fall. Or if a child was still holding on to your fingers, could you tell them to run? No, because they aren't ready and they are being set up for failure. Scaffolding curriculum is the same idea. You want to provide the supports necessary to teach students how to learn. If they are given a tool and not taught how to use it, or given a chance to practice it, they won't know what to do with it, and it will likely end up in the garbage can. When identifying skills students need to be successful, they often lend themselves to scaffolding. Thinking of scaffolding during this process can provide much needed support to students. For example, if the skill you identified is that students need to be able to evaluate content from a textbook, they may need to be able to do other skills before they can accomplish that. Maybe students need to be able to identify main themes in a textbook before they can evaluate content in a textbook. Maybe students need to be able to explain the main themes in the textbook within the context of the course before they can evaluate the content. In this case, you would want to create outcomes for each of these. Identify main themes, explain main themes, and evaluate content. At this point, pause the video and review the skills you identified. Are there other skills students need to be able to do before they accomplish any of those? Now, how do we take this information to actually create outcomes? First, we use simple, specific action verbs. Bloom's taxonomy, available on the next slide, can help with this. Here's an example. Students will be able to identify. So identify is the verb in that statement. Step 2 includes something specific for measure. What exactly do students need to be able to show to determine if they have completed the outcome? For example, students will be able to identify 5. Step 3, what is the skill or knowledge the student must gain? Example, students will be able to identify 5 student support services on campus. This last example is a complete outcome that clearly specifies what the student needs to know and how it is going to be measured. Now look at the skills you identified previously and go to the next slide with Bloom's taxonomy provided. In looking at Bloom's taxonomy, you want to determine what level of understanding your students should reach. Do they need to just memorize and recall material? That's the knowledge column. Or do they need to be able to gather information around what they have learned? That would be the create column. Using verbs from each category can help to scaffold levels of understanding. Pause the video now and identify what verbs you are going to use in creating your students' success outcomes. Remember, as you move from left to right, the complexity of what you are asking your students to do increases. By this time, you have hopefully completed step 1 of identifying the verbs for each outcome. Now decide how you are going to measure the completion of each outcome. And last, include the specific skill or knowledge the students need to have. Pause the video at this time to try to complete your 3 to 5 student success outcomes. Now that you have 3 to 5 student success outcomes, please bring them to the workshop on November 2nd. We will share our outcomes with the group and work together to finalize them. If you have any questions, please let me know.